I kept dreaming of a world I thought I'd never see. And then, one day...
I think you want to see this.
So, we found it.
Welcome to the FDH Lounge highlight reel. From the team that brought you the FDH Lounge and the Fantasy Draft Help Insider, deliver to you the next evolution in new media excellence.
Doesn't it make sense that we would stay here and have possibly the time of your life?
The FDH Lounge highlight reel.
What would you say you do here?
The great American radio show on internet TV, where nothing is off topic.
Pay attention.
The following excerpts are organized by theme, subject matter, or gravitas.
Was that really necessary?
There's never a shortage of variety, entertainment, or pertinent content.
You'll know it's just a show, right? Best show in the world.
This compilation is reflective of over 150 episodes of unique and entertaining programming.
All right, what do you say?
We're online and ready.
And now, for your consideration, the highlight reel.
Wow, I know, right?
Episode 67, Football and TV star Tahani Jones. What were some of the things that you feel benefited you for your time on the gridiron here? What were some of the things that helped you as far as whether it be adding variety to your workouts or adding some other things here that you think are going to be of benefit to the Bengals this year?
I think all the sports I played actually added a benefit. I think all the people I met added a benefit. I think all my travels added a benefit. I mean, you take Muay Thai, which is kickboxing. The amount of core strength that comes out of that is tremendous. You take strongman competition, the amount of power that comes from lifting Atlas stones and carrying Husafel stones. You take cycling and the amount of cardiovascular training that comes out of that. You take Dragon Boat racing, cardiovascular. Each sport is applicable in its own way and how it directly impacts your body on a physiological format as well as psychological. Traveling to different countries, learning to deal with different people in different languages, different situations, both positive and negative, both challenging and not challenging. All of that translates into a positive season. All that translates into being better on the field.
Well, I think an obvious question that would come to mind is, how much of this stuff, if any, would require a special waiver from either the NFL, the Cincinnati Bengals, whatever? I know that teams are going to be protective of the guys who are under contract. You're obviously a key part of this defense for the Bengals here. Was there anything at all that required you to get an okay before you went ahead and did it?
No, the reason why I do it is to prepare myself. And the interesting thing about it is when you're in your off season, everything that you do, you're liable for it. That includes everything. If you're deciding to go to Switzerland and swing and do wrestling, or if you decide to go on, play the links. And things happen in both situations, and as an athlete, you have to take that into your own hands.
Well, it's something that I think people would like to know, in looking at somebody like you, who, as I said before, and I think the term Renaissance man really would come into play here with what you're doing with TV, the work that you've done, multimedia through the ESPN family here, whether it be the ESPN website, anything that you've written or anything for television. Somebody like you with your experiences, you have professional experiences in that realm, you have professional experiences on the gridiron, you started in a Super Bowl game, which clearly would be the pinnacle of your career to this point. Is there anything right now that you've done off the field that comes close to what in your mind, to what you've done on the field with the Super Bowl, or is it just apples and oranges?
I guess you would call it apples and oranges. It's all amazing fruit that falls from an incredible tree of life.
Episode 84, End of the Decade Sports Roundtable. You take this decade as a whole, Russ, and I'm looking at it saying the two top players I think you have to say in whatever order, and I'm going to say it in this order. I'm a homer, but I'll say it anyways. Nick Lidstrom, Martin Brodeur. I don't know if that says the healthiest thing about a league when a goalie and a defenseman are your top guys. You can be a purist and you can like it and you can say, oh, that's awesome and it's fundamental hockey and everything like that. But if you don't have a forward in the mix for top player of the decade, you're not going to have a lot of luck penetrating the mainstream, are you?
No, and I don't disagree with that, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think when you go down to the basics of hockey, it's always going to come down to defense and goaltending, and everything else is going to be secondary. So with a guy like Lidstrom, he is all-world. He is maybe the best I've ever seen. I'm not going to say he's the best ever because there's been some tremendous guys over the years, but I've had a chance to see him his entire career, and he is pretty incredible, pretty flawless, pretty unbelievable how nobody could even pin this guy against the boards and knock a tooth out occasionally. I mean, he seems like he's almost in stealth mode. So he's pretty incredible. And then as far as Brodeur goes, yeah, he broke the Sawchuk record in more games. We knew that would happen. But other than that, I mean, his defense hasn't been the same for the last 5 years, yet his numbers are still incredible. He's the best goalie of all time. I could say that easily without having any argument. I know some people will say Patrick Waugh, somebody might say Jacques Plante, somebody,
Sawchuk.
But my thing is you really can't touch this guy. And then as far as, like you said, if you want to talk about the 4 signature players, I'll add John Tavares as the 4th, along with Crosby, Ovechkin, and Malkin. I mean, that is helping to transform the league now. There's no question about it. Matter of fact, you could look at the NHL compared to every other league, and that's the NFL included, and none of those leagues have the same amount of young talent that the NHL has right now.
Episode 106, NFL Films President Steve Sabol. I wanted to ask you, as far as the potential for repurposing some of the old game films that you have there, I mean, you have a library that is just unmatched.
Well, the first thing is that there's 100 million feet of film in our library. It's the largest sports film library in the world, and the only other human endeavor that has been recorded more extensively on 16-millimeter film than the National Football League is World War II. And eventually we're going to pass them. I think eventually, with the Internet, is that our entire library will be available to fans on the Internet. So if you're a Earl Campbell fan and you want to see, I want to see all Earl Campbell's touchdowns, you'll be able to access our library and just punch up Earl Campbell touchdowns, and every one of his touchdown runs will come up. Or if you're a Browns fan and you want to see something with Bernie Kosar or Brian Sipe, all of that, every Brian Sipe touchdown pass will be accessible through the Internet. So that's going to be, it's still 3, 4, maybe 5 years away, and it's going to come through the NFL.com. But we're at the process now of logging and categorizing that.
Episode 62, Deadspin founder Will Leach. We had on a gentleman, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, St. Van Arsdale from Movie Line. We were talking about different movies. One of the things that he had written about recently for The Reeler was We Live in Public, which, of course, I became initially aware of through your blog months ago and reading your review of it. Let's start on that. That's living the experience had to be surreal, being in the webcam house at the height of the .com era. And then B, to now see the movie come out and you're so far removed from it, that's got to be weird on like 65 different levels.
Yeah, it's very strange because the house that was filled up with all the cameras, it was the idea was that it would be a 100-day project, but the couple that had set up the project, they broke up with like 20 days to go, so I stayed there for the last 10 days. So I felt bad. This incredible project, an amazing, artistic, very expensive project to capture real life. For the last week, had me doing my laundry and watching baseball. So I think, if you wonder why that show got canceled, but yeah, the idea that to be in a house that was rigged completely with cameras, the first thing, and probably the most important lesson they told me when I got in there was to know how to fog up the shower cameras.
Well,
so I think I did an okay job at that, but I haven't seen the movie yet, so there's a little bit of a fear that somehow there's footage of a naked circa 2000 Will Leach that multiplexes will be paying their good hard-earned money for.
Yes, something for them to exploit, definitely. And talking about that, when we had ST on the show, we were kind of saying it's only, 9-10 years ago, but it's really almost a period piece, isn't it? I mean, when you look at the .com era, and the way that things move so fast these days, you could almost call that a period piece.
Oh, it's like Remains of the Day. I mean, it really is. It's like a Civil War reenactment. It really is such a different time. And I think because I moved out to New York under that kind of idea, like that I had written for a website and it was bought by some hot web media company that was going to make everybody rich and so on, and that lasted about 3 months. And so yeah, that kind of heady time of the late 1900s, 1990s, and the early aughts, I guess the case may be. There were definitely a lot of very young people with no marketable skills that somehow had a lot of money and a lot of dumb things to waste it on. So it is very strange to think of that. It's a very strange time, I think, in New York City history. The notion right when there were really no ramifications for anything that you did, and no reason to worry about anything. It was like the crazy bright lights, big city '80s, except a lot more nerdy.
Episode 2, military blogger Bill Raggio. The elements that are in Iraq. We're starting to hear a little bit more coverage recently, especially with this talk about going after Iranian agents in the country, and you've done some writing about this on your website. Speak about the externality in terms of the Iranian agents that are over there. We haven't heard as much about the Syrians, but you know that there's got to be some of those. Al-Qaeda being an international organization, and of course you had that excellent State of the Jihad 2006 on your website as well here. Speak to some of the things flowing in from around the world that are complicating this.
Including Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, we have. Yeah, basically what you have. I mean, Saudi Arabia is up to. I'll start with Saudi Arabia. Up to the old game of allowing its foreign or its extremists to bleed out of the country. If they go away and fight somewhere else, they did this during Afghanistan. They won't be a problem. Well, the Saudis play that game, as well as they're concerned about their own, safety. And it's difficult to get a handle on what goes on in Saudi Arabia. It's quite a schizophrenic country. But, so they basically allow their fighters, and then you have the Saudi Golden Chain, which finances much of Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda in Iraq. The Golden Chain is Al-Qaeda's, its coffers, its its source of finances. They like to see the deaths of Americans and the deaths of Shia, so you have the money sliding in from there. So Syria serves as a Ba'athist stronghold. All of all the Ba'athists have moved into Syria, and a lot of these Ba'athists have sort of joined up with Al-Qaeda or become allies with Al-Qaeda in Iraq. They have a lot of money, billions of dollars of Saddam Hussein's money flows from there as well. Iran has been running agents. I saw a number of up to 30, an Iraqi general, I believe, estimated over 30,000 Iranian agents. I think that number might be quite high, and maybe it's 3,000 if you play the typical Arab or Middle East equation, divide by 10. But they have a significant number of agents. We've been arresting them. They've been selling weapons and providing the resources to not only to Sadr's Mahdi army, but to elements of the Badr Corps, which is another Shia militia. They've been selling weapons to Ansar al-Sunnah, which is a Islamist terrorist organization that has pledged loyalty to Osama bin Laden. There's Al-Qaeda in Iraq and other Sunni insurgent groups as well, providing mines and other sophisticated weapons to kill Americans. Their interest is to I believe what the Iranian interest is to have Iraq balkanize and form into a Sunni, a Shia, and a Kurdish state. So it believes that it could exert more control over over a Shia state. So a continuing violence certainly serves in Iran's equations here, as well as to force the U.S. to suffer defeat in the Middle East. That would be a huge black eye on us and would lead to the ascendancy of Iran in the region if they can cause a U.S. defeat. Those are the three main players, and then of course you have Al-Qaeda Central, which is feeding Al-Qaeda in Iraq and sending its foreign fighters. We've had fighters killed from Afghanistan, Syria, Algeria. All over the Middle East and as well as in the Western world have been killed in fighting in Iraq. And one of the big criticisms of the war is that we've created terrorists there. And I always say it's both. Yes, Iraq is an engine for jihad as well as it's also with the flypaper theory. We've killed a lot of senior, 10, 15-year veterans of Al-Qaeda, mid-level and senior-level commanders. Omar al-Farouk was a senior Al-Qaeda leader who escaped from Bagram prison in Afghanistan in 2005, I believe it was. The British wound up killing him in Basra late 2006. So, Al Qaeda Global has a vested interest in seeing the United States lose in Iraq as well.
Episode 39, ESPN baseball reporter Jason Stark. Especially growing up in Cleveland. I mean, everybody knows Bob Feller. You know he was a phenom. But it's amazing. I mean, to think of the parallels of LeBron James. And again, and I'm as guilty, I guess, in this as anybody. I mean, his story seems almost unparalleled to us. And in a sense it is because of the modern media culture. You didn't have that around Feller was there. But if you basically apply the standards of the day, he was LeBron James, and that's amazing to make that connection.
Yeah, I invoked LeBron James's name in that chapter, and not by accident, because I absolutely agree with that. Now, the difference is, we're pretty sure LeBron is not going to go off to war.
Right.
And Bob Feller went off to war, and we don't really know exactly what would have happened had he not, had he just kept on going. But it's pretty safe to say that he wouldn't be underrated, because he'd have the greatest stats of any pitcher not named Walter Johnson, probably. If the years when he was off to war had gone anything like the years before he went off to war, we'd be looking at clearly one of the 2 or 3 greatest pitchers in the history of baseball.
Episode 99, TV and technology journalist Simon Applebaum. As far as developments with TV with the year 2010, it's been the buzz for months now. This is going to be the year that 3D really starts to get a foothold in here. We've been hearing about the World Cup is going to be the first big event with that to happen, with ESPN launching their service. You had an opportunity here during the Masters to be able to check out a little bit of, I don't know if you'd call it a pilot program or whatever the case may be. You were there in New York at a place watching it on there. Talk about the experience. Talk about, because everybody's kind of wondering what this is going to be like to watch 3D on home TV. What were you picking up, and what was the buzz of the people you were talking to?
Well, I was over at Time Warner Center on Sunday afternoon when Phil Mickelson made those miraculous shots to win his third green jacket. Time Warner Center, Columbus Circle near Central Park had a special screening of the Masters. It basically was CBS's pictures, but ESPN's Mike Tirico and Andy North did the play-by-play. And they were right outside Borders. They had hundreds of people coming in. Many stayed. People going in and out. The place was packed. People were on sofas squishing to see this coverage. And I have to tell you, it was remarkable to watch it on 3D. You really saw the colors of Augusta National Golf Club just popped. The greens, you could see the undulations. You could see how the sand traps looked. You could see how the mounds were outside the greens, outside the fairways. It really put more spectacular punch into the Masters, and I think for people who are rooting for Mickelson or for Tiger Woods or whoever to win the tournament, I think it gave them more of a rooting interest. It certainly spiked their appeal, and for people I could talk to during the time I was there, they were very excited about it. They didn't have any concerns about the glasses or having like eye strain or whatever. They just loved the coverage. They were really, really surprised. And with that, something should be said about the Augusta National Golf Club. I am not a big fan of Billy Payne and the people who run the tournament. I love the tournament. I love the coverage. I think the Augusta National Golf Club, along with the International Olympic Committee, may be the most backward sports organization in the world. But you got to give them credit for all the faults that they have, for recognizing what 3D could be for them. And the fact that they were able to allow Comcast and Time Warner Cable and other cable operators around the country on very short notice to put this coverage together is something. And you also got to give credit to the cable operators and other people who were able to get this thing going with less than 3 weeks' notice. I mean, Time Warner Cable had flyers. I think they really took great pains to sort of say to the audience at where I was in New York, here's what 3D is all about. Here's when it's going to come. Don't get your hopes up too high. Watch the coverage for what it was.
Episode 115, Chronicles Magazine Managing Editor Tom Piatek. You mentioned a minute ago the name Jonah Goldberg. The thing that I will think about with him the rest of my life is that asinine column that he put up about how we should invade Africa. This was in that kind of placid time there. Right. We need a new challenge, national greatness, blah, blah, blah. That right there of just looking for trouble, it was somewhere in that time right before 9/11, and it's just, if you want to know what the neocons really stand for, look at that. The guy wanted to invade Africa to quote-unquote civilize a continent.
Yeah, no, it was completely insane. Once again, Goldberg hasn't stepped away from it. And the irony is that none of these guys really have paid a price politically for being wrong so often. Goldberg's career certainly hasn't suffered from being a Bush supporter, an Iraq War supporter, writing the idiotic column you mentioned. They're not called to account. It's very odd. I mean, apparently punditry is one profession where being wrong really is not a hindrance to career advancement.
Episode 2, the Be True to Your School debate.
I got a Letterman sweater with the letter in front. I got for football and track. I'm proud to wear it now when I cruise around.
And with that said, we're setting the table now for what is going to be a very excellent discussion. As somebody who never had the chance growing up, who was deprived of the opportunity to root for the Scarlet and Gray.
I was deprived of that 18 years of brainwashing.
And so you have what amounts to actually an act of hostility towards the Ohio State University, as they call themselves. And so you are on that side. Paul Teeple, a much more recent graduate of Ohio University than any of us grizzled gentlemen here, out of the school a couple of years now, but Paul of the mindset that he is going to root for Ohio State next year, that he feels no compunction to root for the Bobcats because, admittedly, and I think nobody will deny this, Ohio State has a lot more at stake in the matter. The controversial viewpoint out of all of the people here, clearly, given the climate of the participants and what we've been able to see over the weekend here, some folks have had some thoughts on this. Paul, again, it's not a popular point of view among those who wear the green and the white. I myself will be wearing the green and the white in the shoe next year, as I was in 1999, so lay it out for us and tell me why, in your estimation, it's okay to root against Ohio on that esteemed day.
Well, Rick, first of all, I don't think that's necessarily an unpopular view amongst the green and white. Most of my friends that I graduated with, both in Scripps and in other schools of Ohio University in 2004 and 2005, almost exclusively shared my viewpoint of Ohio State first. Why? Because they were raised Ohio State fans. Oh. But more importantly,
I want their names so we can take their degrees.
Oh, that's very sweet of you, Chris. At any rate, to say that it's an unpopular view amongst the green and white, I think is a bit of a misnomer, just because it's the unpopular view on Bobcat Attack, which is the hardcorest of the hardcores, the parochial, the numb in the brainular area, and most importantly, the deluded to the point of psychosis people on that message board should not be mistaken under any circumstances for regular Ohio University students who grew up in Ohio and had their own free will of choices in terms of growing up and watching a team, and that happened to be the Ohio State Buckeyes. Basically, what's being asked of people like me, Rick, is that years, decades of memories and sports fandom be set aside for the choice of a school based on career and long-term goals in one's life. I'm not saying that I don't root for Ohio University. I certainly love Ohio University. I didn't say I wanted Ohio State to go out and beat the hell out of OU in 2008 when they played. I said I wanted OU to keep it close and keep it respectable because I want them to have a showing that can still positively affect both contributions from alumni and recruiting on a national level. And certainly, if they were to hang tough with the beast up Route 33, obviously that's still going to affect the way that Solich is able to go out and recruit in the greater Ohio area.
Well, something you said, Paul, it's a little dispiriting if we're to take it at face value. Chris, is this a generational thing? Are we the grizzled old guys that believe in school loyalty? All the kids are going for Ohio State now because it's the cool thing to do. Are we obsolete?
No, I don't think so. I think his perspective on this is distorted. When I go onto campus and, you see, I've been, recently in the last couple of years, I've been down to the campus. I've seen people with Ohio State gear on, students at Ohio University, and I ask them point blank, well, who are you going to root for when Ohio, and they tell me, oh, Ohio, of course, it's my school. And so I think most people, Rick, share your position on that, is that if they grew up an Ohio State fan for whatever reason, then they're still loyal in the end to their own university. I disagree with what's riding on a game like that. Sure, Ohio State maybe has an opportunity for a BCS bowl, but for a school like Ohio, it's a potential for a program-defining win, some momentum that can be built for a program that's trying to sort of resurrect itself from the good years, which unfortunately were in the 1960s. And so there is a lot on the line for your alma mater in terms of that, and just keeping it close isn't good enough. So I think it's insane to think that you would actually root against your own school, your own alma mater, for a school that you don't have any actual direct connection to.
Episode 77, Baseball Hall of Famer Tommy Lasorda.
Faithful of that crazy brand of Dodger ball. I'm talking baseball. Gil Hodges, Campanella, Dodgers baseball. Zach and Cuccinello, Pistol Pete and Robbie and Big Nuke. Junior Pee Wee Preacher and the Duke. Talking baseball. Forever Dodger blue.
You look at a situation here, certainly one would think that if you guys were to win the World Series, your best bet would be probably a scenario like 2003. You had a guy like Josh Beckett who stepped up for the Florida Marlins, and when you look at Clayton Kershaw, who is definitely going to be one of the greatest pitchers of the next decade if he stays healthy, the same kind of opportunity I think exists for you guys with him.
Well, that's very true, and we realize that this guy's got great stuff, and we're relying on him now for the big ones. Joe just took him away all season the right way, make sure he didn't hurt himself, and now he's ready to put him in one of the biggest games of his life.
Welcome back to the FDH Lounge.
It's interesting. Yield compression fractures in our L1 and L2 vertebrae.
Lateral epicondyle and lower disc.
Covered in a fine dust of particulate matter. I ran the DNA. Brain tissue on the fragments means they're from a frontal bone. It's composed of silica, sulfur compounds, and synthetic rubbers. I've also noted a constellation of identical non-metric variants.
We make learning fun.
Phalanges, 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 dancing phalanges, dancing phalanges.
And now, your FDH Dignitaries.
Episode 72, Bob Barker. I was greatly entertained, and it was kind of funny. I was talking to your associate, Henry, last night, learning a little bit about what your experience was like on Monday night, and he told me about how far back you really go with the wrestling business. Even Gorgeous George, who I think many could say is almost one of the founding fathers of sports entertainment as we know it.
That's right. After when I came out of the Navy after World War II and went back to college, for a while I ran the concessions at the Shrine Mosque in Springfield, Missouri on wrestling night. They had wrestling there once a week. And we had some of the old-timers, Speedy Lawrence, Sergeant Keniston, and Gorgeous George came through there, and he was on the way up. He had not become the big star that he was to become, but he still had a great act, made his entrance with that effeminate robe on, had the man go in with the atomizer and spray the ring before he'd set foot in it, and he put on a show that was just terrific. The audience was screaming. It was a great experience to see.
He really was one of the guys who made that transition from when wrestling was basically on the carnival circuit and it was much more of a straightforward pursuit. He really was kind of a historical bridge to what we see now and the massive spectacle that it's become. And seeing that at its roots, as you did, beginning of that evolution to right now, the Monday night, the culmination of what it's become, and working in the Price is Raw on Monday night there and having that kind of fun with it, that must have just been such an experience with you, much like probably parallel to some of the things in Priceless Memories where you've seen the way that television has evolved over time and some of the different things that happened in the course of your career. You've seen this business that you've watched from afar probably most of the time. You get to see it Monday night and how it's grown into this modern marvel.
Absolutely. I did see Gorgeous George at that time do a completely new and different thing. He was in the vanguard. He was the first of these wrestlers to have an act. He before that it had been pretty straight wrestling, but he made it a show. He really did, all on his own. It became a show the moment he entered the arena. And now, that experience for me, I went to Chicago to do it. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, Vince McMahon, he is one very bright, very sensitive, promoter and producer. He was right in the middle of everything, and he's put together a group of young people, and they are real pros. I don't mean the wrestlers now. I'm talking about his staff and his technicians. And those wrestlers, each of them has a personality, and he plays on that. He has his own music. For example, on a couple of occasions, I talked first with the wrestler who was already in the ring. And then I would say, and now, believe it or not, your opponent is, and I wouldn't say his name, and he wouldn't come out. The music for him would come on, and they'd start screaming. They were either for him or against him, and then he'd come on. They know him so well that they're identified by their theme songs. But it's a production. You just have to be right in the middle of it to really appreciate it.
Episode 104, Good Times Magazine writer Lloyd Carroll. We have with us on the FDH Lounge to discuss the fall television season, Lloyd Carroll from Good Times Magazine and Simon Applebaum from Tomorrow Will Be Televised.
There's a mid-season replacement on the CW called Shedding for the Wedding. I kid you not. It's from the producer of The Biggest Loser. And so we're going to have couples who are overweight competing to lose weight to get the wedding of their dreams. Absolutely god-awful. There was such derisive laughter when I was presented. I thought Don Ostroff, the president of the CW, Entertainment, was going to start crying. I'd never seen that before. Simon's right about diversity. I mean, I used to joke the CW used to stand for completely white.
I'll tell you what, guys, we actually have a very nice surprise here. Senior Vice President for Communications at the CW, Mr. Paul McGuire, joining us here.
I would again, however, Lloyd, chide you for using the adjective derisive to describe the laughter that developed. Shedding for the wedding. Well, I don't know how you can how you can characterize the tonal laughter of 3,000 people in a room at the Madison Square Garden Theater. Perhaps you are more prescient and psychic than I am. And as far as the completely white network, I mean, come on, let's give us some props.
I understand that you're the master of eliciting through your questions at press conferences nervous, uncomfortable laughter. Is it possible that's what that
I have been known for that.
Episode 100, the Hardcore Football Roundtable.
The NFL, increasingly in recent years, a win-now league. These draft picks have to come in, have to contribute almost immediately. I think that's one of the reasons we've seen quarterbacks slide from time to time in a couple of these drafts here. Teams are drafting on need, it's win-now, etc. So, in a win-now league, how do we end up in a situation here, John, where more and more teams are moving to the 3-4 in a league where almost no colleges are churning out 3-4 ready players? What's your take on this, on a league where, unless you're rating somebody from the Patriots or the Steelers or a successful team in free agency, you're not getting a guy can play the 3-4?
Well, that's a great question, and I think what you're seeing is a lot of hybrid tweener types in colleges today, because I think college football coaches, as scholarships continue to get reduced, I think you're seeing college football coaches going after athletes more than physical attributes, meaning, a certain height, weight, that sort of thing. They're going after athletes, and they're thinking, if you give me an athlete, I'll plug them in somewhere on my football team, offense or defense, and make some things happen. And I think what you're seeing in the NFL is a little bit of the same thing. They'll take Vernon Golson's a great example, a freak athlete, but the guy just doesn't understand NFL defenses, especially a defense like Rex Ryan. So he struggled to kind of, is he a defensive end? Is he an outside linebacker? Well, those are two totally different positions in the National Football League. Where at Ohio State it was Vernon, attack the quarterback, and that's what he went and did. So I think you're seeing teams like, you mentioned the Steelers, the Patriots, even the Broncos now with Josh McDaniels coming from that New England system, they're going after intelligent football players, some guys that may not be athletically the most gifted in the draft per se or grade the highest, but these guys that are getting 43 on the Wonderlic test, like Eric Decker, the wide receiver from Minnesota, did that the Broncos drafted. They're going after intelligent football players because they feel, all these guys are athletes. I'll take guys that I know can learn this system and learn how to play different positions, multiple positions, and I'll be successful. So I think that's what the successful teams in the NFL are doing, they're kind of ignoring just the physical attribute, the physical specimen, and going after more the intelligent player. Because, like you said, college football is not teaching these guys the NFL game. They're teaching them more of a gimmick style because that's what wins in college football.
Jason, I'll segue to you next for this. Now, you and I have had some conversations off air about this 3-4 and a 4-3 and the fact that almost nobody's coming into the league ready for this thing, especially in a league where if you're going to be like a 3-4 defensive end or even a 3-4 tackle and just be kind of like a space eater, that's a situation where it's really hard to find guys in college who literally fit that bill based on their body of work.
For me, it's frustrating because I see the guys that have the size, speed, intangibles to play those positions, but like you mentioned out of the gate, most of these universities are not playing that style of ball. Now, the interesting thing is, as we saw last week in the NFL draft, there were just as many ready-to-go 3-4 nose tackles as there were 4-3 defensive tackles, say, in the first 40 picks. So maybe we're starting to get a little bit more like the NBA where teams are going to start drafting on potential more so than body of work. But it's the other positions that are more intriguing. John mentioned the hybrids. Defensive ends turned outside linebackers. The fact that it seems like a 3-4 inside linebacker is in fact different than a 4-3 middle linebacker. Ultimately, I'd like to see more of these colleges and universities just go that way because not that it's their responsibility to groom guys for the NFL, but if it works in the NFL, why does it not work in college?
It would seem to me that it might almost be the flip side of what you see, where guys like Charlie Weiss, when he was at Notre Dame, could tell kids, hey, I'll get you ready for the pros. You'll be in a pro-style offense. If you were one of the few major institutions running a 3-4, that might be a selling point, too. Hey, this is going to be a good spotlight for pro teams for you. Nate, how do you see this? I know you're somebody who, me and you have just had countless times off air talking about X's and O's and the schematics of football and everything like that. How do you see an issue like this and the contradiction of a league that is obsessed with guys contributing right now, whether it be for salary cap purposes or otherwise, or maybe it's just the general win now pressure, dealing with a situation where if you're running a 3-4, you're having to project like a mother on these guys?
Yeah, but I think it's already been the nail's been hit on the head, Rick, that you draft the guys that are the smart players that have the physical skill set. If these are smart guys, to me, it doesn't really matter what system they came up through. They are adaptable. If they're as intelligent as you and I are and they've got the football skill set, I think they can fit in. The coaching in the NFL is, the best coaching in pro sports probably with everything they do. And, if a guy's young and eager and willing to do it the way he's told, I don't see it as big of an issue. 44 games they played in college, 48 games, and 40 games in high school. Those 80 games. It's not an impossible transition for those players to change into the new system and just to do it the way they're told, as long as they have that in.
Episode 90, comedian and TV personality Don Jamieson. I want to start with the stand-up because I caught you guys when you came through. I believe it was back in the fall when you guys played at the Improv, and I was just really struck by it. I didn't know if this was an accident or this was a conscious plan on you guys' part, but I know that obviously you and Jim are good friends and everything and have worked together an awful lot, but hearing you guys back-to-back, catching you live as I hadn't done before, I was just really struck by the contrast of it. Your show, a little more up-tempo. His is a little bit more kind of laid-back, kind of droll. It was, if you're somebody like me that likes a lot of different kinds of comedy, it was a real treat because you kind of get to sample some different styles. Is that a conscious thing to put you two guys together, or are you just friends who started working together and that just happens to be a nice byproduct?
Look, Jim and I when we met 15 years ago, we realized quickly that we are like long lost brothers. Like we were cut from the same cloth. We both, grew up in New Jersey. We had mullets. We listened to heavy metal and, did then and still do think farts are funny and always will be. So we always had that in common. And he was my mentor as a stand-up. But, yeah, obviously over the years as I began to develop my act, mine's a little more high energy. Like, it's sort of in the
sort of in the tone of Jim's, but with like 3 Red Bulls, and maybe some, a little meth thrown in there for good measure. And Jim's a little more dry, which is cool. And it makes the comedy show more enjoyable if you got 2 different styles, 2 or 3 different kinds of comics on the show. It's better for the audience.
Episode 112, baseball pitcher Tommy John. There's a quote here, and it's kind of a cynical one, but a funny one. I just want to get your reaction to it, and it might very well be outrage for all I know, but here's the quote. This was from a scout. Quote, Tommy John against Don Sutton. If anyone can find one smooth ball from that game, he ought to send it to Cooperstown, end quote. So when you hear that kind of cynicism, what kind of goes through your mind?
Well, here's the thing. We were accused of a lot of stuff. And if I did everything that I was supposed to do to a baseball, I would have to have a carpenter's belt on my waist to go out there.
Episode 97, Healthcare Reform Debate. Ever since the time of Reagan, we've been hearing anecdotes. Ronald Reagan, welfare queens and limousines. The Republicans are, the party of anecdotes. And, over time it's become theological stuff here because of the religious right and everything like that. Oh, the one side is anecdotes and theology, and the other side is reason and enlightenment and all of that. The weird thing is, Colin, I look at this healthcare debate, and it, to me, has been nothing but anecdotes here. I mean, you look at that healthcare summit, it was, can you top this with the sob stories and stuff here? I could just see them afterwards. Okay, Barney, you win the office pool. Left-handed Haitian immigrant with AIDS, clubfoot, and leukemia who got thrown off her healthcare plan. You look at something like that. You look at the fact that the day of the march, all this stuff comes out about the alleged incidents there, none of which I think have been captured on camera. To me, Colin, I see nothing but anecdotal stuff that's been used to sell this whole thing here. Tell me where you think I'm wrong.
Rick, I always respect where you're coming from, and I always have a good time talking with you. But, when you're talking, how many uninsured? 40 million uninsured in this country? That's a lot of anecdotes, And anecdotes win when they resonate, and these resonated.
Episode 61, former Survivor frontman Jimmy Jamison. You had that tremendous run in the heyday of the band, and then you got to experience it again here. In this past decade, what were the circumstances when you got back together with the band and got to go out and experience it again on the road?
Well, I got back with the band, I guess it was actually it was just me and the guitar player, Frank Sullivan. We got back together, decided to put it back together in 2000, and I stayed with the band until about 2006 through the Reach album, Reach CD, and it was it was a lot of fun at first. Everything was going great, but things changed as we started getting a little more notoriety and started our fame. The fame was sort of coming back a little bit. Things got a little strange, and it was like it was a partnership kind of thing, and it just didn't quite work out as a partnership. So I decided to go ahead and do my thing and let them go ahead with the Survivor.
Episode 67, film critic Ben Lyons. I want to go to that question philosophically here. I think it also relates to the small screen to a certain extent as well. You're going to think I'm way out there when I say this. I'm one of like 5 people on planet Earth who actually liked some of the post-Seinfeld shows, the ones that Jason Alexander did and Michael Richards, and even the first one that Julia Louis-Dreyfus did. I forget what it was called, but the one before this, New Adventures of Old Christine. You could kind of see elements of their characters in there. You could see it was faint in places, but you could see it. Is it a double-edged sword for people when they become so identified with a role that anything else, maybe it might be a little distracting looking for elements of that in their next performances?
Absolutely, especially when it comes to television, because you're coming into people's homes. So there's a comfort level that's established and an intimacy, and you're playing a character sometimes as many as 250 episodes. 200 times you're playing a character. So, and you're also getting locked in to play that character for 9 months out of the year. So of course there's going to be some type of natural connection that will live beyond the show's days on air. It's funny you mentioned those old Seinfeld spin-offs. I remember one of those Michael Richards shows where he had a date with the girl that evening and found out that she was a kind of girl who liked the guy with big muscles, so he went to the gym all day. And, of course, at dinner he was silly putty because he was lifting all day. I don't know why that stood out in my mind, but like you, I kind of thought, that's kind of funny. It's not so bad. Everybody's quick to jump on it and say it's terrible, but yeah, it takes a lot for actors. You know, look at somebody like Katherine Heigl. How difficult it's been for her to sort of break away from Grey's Anatomy while respecting what made you a big star. George Clooney obviously did it successfully. Jason Bateman has experienced that recently with Arrested Development and now going on and having a career as a movie star. But yeah, everybody's nuts. Honestly, that's from working on the E! Channel. That's one thing I've really noticed in my time of interviewing actors and preparing for doing the research. Everybody's career is different, and everybody has moves that make sense on paper, or at the time a director was really in demand, so you wanted to work with them, and then boom, it just doesn't come together, and you have to go back to the drawing board. Everybody's got a different story, and everybody's one role away. Everybody's a performance like Mickey Rourke and The Wrestler for completely getting a clean slate and redeeming themselves in a lot of ways. So it's an amazing industry, and how one performance can really lead to the next.
Episode 73, Craigslist founder Craig Newmark. The thing I think has just been amazing, and one of the things that probably people are most grateful for, is the business model of this site. That you guys have resisted the urge to basically try and sell off everything for the last penny here. That this thing, it's almost incomprehensible to me that I bet north of 99.9% of the users of this site have never paid a dime for their services on it. And you guys have been able to thrive and prosper, and everybody wins. It's just one of those utopian sort of stories, it seems like.
It's pretty basic from our point of view. Sure, we got to run as a serious business. We got to pay the bills, and it's nice to provide for one's future. But I don't get on a gut level what's the point in making a lot more. I mean, we run as a business and we run as a community service. Same time, sure we want to do well, but I've had my car for 7 years and don't see any need for a new one.
Episode 87, FDH Lounge Spotlight website, thisiswhyyourfat.com. Bacon-wrapped hot dog topped with a pork sausage, cheese dip, and diced jalapenos.
I hate to say it, but that kind of sounds good without the jalapenos.
Dude, you're not looking at the picture, man. It looks nasty.
Picture looks pretty gnarly. French toast cupcake with maple frosting and bacon. That's kind of an... There's a lot of good bacon.
I'd try that one.
That one I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm all in. Where's my local IHOP?
Yeah. Deep fried Reuben balls, corned beef, sauerkraut,
that is
Swiss
my lingo,
and Russian dressing encased in breadcrumbs, battered and deep fried. You down with that?
I'd scarf down a bunch of those.
Chocolate covered bacon, maple donut bar. How about that?
I'd try it.
And the Thanksgiving leftover sandwich?
Yes! And you know what, Brian? I'm calling foul on this one. There's no way.
That looks like something after I ate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right about that.
That is awful.
Scooped out of the turlet. I'm calling foul on this because there's no way somebody had all this stuff for Thanksgiving dinner. Some of these ones I see. Leftover turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, gravy, corn, cranberry sauce, mac and cheese, spinach balls, Puerto Rican rice, Brussels sprouts, pearl onions, bacon, ravioli, and White Castle hamburgers. Who has White Castle hamburgers?
That's why they had enough left over to make a whole sandwich.
Yeah, inside a foot-long bun. That's Thanksgiving leftovers plus.
That is something that I'm not buying for $5 at Subway.
Right. Oh, here's a great one. Picnic popsicles. Bacon cheeseburger chunks, ketchup, mustard, and onion frozen in strawberry Kool-Aid. Would you eat that, Mike?
No. I don't even know who thinks of this.
Episode 112, Fox Business host Eric Bowling. It's interesting because just another coincidence, one of our guests later tonight, Colin Delaney from ePolitics.com. I like to spar with that guy when he's on. He's a little left to center. That makes his politics different than mine. I threw something at him he couldn't rebut, Eric. I said, what about the smokes tax? I said, what could be more regressive than that? Obama signed that into law not long after he came into office. Even Colin couldn't deny that one there. So it's kind of interesting. There have been some things, and I know you're looking at
I have another one for you. Ready for this one?
Yeah.
There's a gold coin tax, where if you buy a gold coin that costs over $600, you know where they've stuck that little tax in there that's brand new. Guess which bill? It's not in the financial reg bill. Which bill do you think they put that one in?
Was that health care?
Yes, sir. The health care bill.
Wow.
They put a gold coin tax in the health care bill. And remember, that was supposed to reform the way we do business in health care. I'm not really sure why gold coin tax is in a health care bill, but it is.
Episode 110, TMZ on TV co-executive producer Charles Letaboutier. the amount of material that you guys are able to generate every day. I haven't been in that business, but it's just looking at it from the outside, I'd just be terrified of waking up one day and going, what if nobody does anything stupid today or seeks out our cameras or whatever?
Well, I got to tell you, Rick, we go through that every morning. We walk in, and myself and Harvey and Evan we meet first thing in the morning, and we go, before we have our meeting, which you see on TV, we have a quick meeting. We talk about what's the thing that we want to start the show with. And it is a little scary because we're driving in and we don't know what we got the night before. And I got to tell you, we've never had a day, obviously, where we didn't have enough to fill the show. And actually, quite the opposite. Most days, there's about anywhere from 4 to 8 minutes of material that gets left on the cutting room floor.
Episode 84, Fox Business Network host Liz Clayman. You were talking about with Fox Business Network was putting an emphasis on small business as opposed to exclusively big business as it is with the other things here, with the coverage, CNN, CNBC. Understandably, okay, there's going to be some keying on Wall Street, and that's where a lot of the important things go down. But it's really important, I think, to have outlets like the one that you're at because, again, I'm one of these people, call it cheesy, whatever you want. Small business is the backbone of this country, not big business, and it's just great to have you guys shine in a spotlight.
It's not cheesy. It's fact, Rick, and you're absolutely right. That I hear differing numbers, but small business, I would say, employs minimum 70% of all the employees in this nation. And if you turn your back on them, are they traded on the New York Stock Exchange? No, but neither was IBM in the early days, and Microsoft. And Intel. I mean, these businesses all started. Well, let's just use the ones that in Ohio, Parker Hannifin or the Limited. They all started as small businesses, and you've got to focus on these guys because they grow up. Just like Fox Business is going to grow up, but they grow up, and they are real drivers of this nation. And as you see, President Obama has put a lot of focus on small businesses. So we're covering that a lot because we know it matters to people. We're not a stock channel. We're a business channel, and we're a money channel. And we're the ones who are focusing on that. I mean, when I worked at CNBC, and they do what they do very, very well, but it's a small, very sort of trader audience. But I would pitch these ideas of these incredible little companies, and I would, well, is it publicly traded? Can I make money off it? No, forget it. And I get that. I mean, that's what they did, and that's fine. But we're broadening the aperture, and I think that's important, especially to a state like Ohio. You know, as Ohio goes, so goes the nation. And I'm from California, where they used to say that about California, but it's true about Ohio, whether it's the political landscape or business or sort of that real AccuWeather, real feel of who America is in many regards. And so, yeah, I'm with you on that. Small business, we focus on it. We have small business reports all the time. It's not just a once-a-week kind of thing.
During any of the FDH Lounge commercial breaks, we recommend that you not wander too far. After all, you could miss something.
Survivors clawed through rubble, searching for any sign of the familiar.
They have no one that can guard them.
Ideal situation for Jimmy Clausen. It may not be the best place in terms of his pocketbook.
Yeah.
And when you do that as a player, then your other teammates respect you.
Probably the only black man on a big dog in Kadoka, South Dakota.
Ooh, Tyler.
All right, now we talked about the inside of the chicken. Now let's talk about the crust. The only way to go, all right, when you're making fried chicken is a situation where you double dip it. All right, so in this container, we're going to add some buttermilk and some hot sauce. Give it a little stir.
We're back. Okay, and now back to the FDH Lounge.
Episode 88, Rock and Soul legend John Oates. It's something that it just has kind of struck me. I don't know if it's ever struck you in talking with fans. For me, typically, most of the stuff I've got on my iPod or CD collection or whatever is generally a little bit harder edged, but I am a huge Hall & Oates guy. I talk to a lot of other people that are the same way. It just seems to be kind of this odd vibe that even the people that you wouldn't necessarily think on the surface are going to be Hall & Oates fans really are. Do you ever get struck by that in terms of talking to people, that it really sometimes tends to be an outlier, that there's a lot of people that are Hall & Oates fans that you might not even think on the surface are?
Well, I've over the years, I think some of our, the biggest support that we've ever had, above and beyond the audience out there, has been from other musicians, and it's been amazing to hear the type of musicians who like the work that Daryl and I have done over the years. I mean, like I said, everything from bluegrass to country to heavy rock. I mean, I remember Axl Rose one time telling me that one of his favorite songs was this really kind of sensitive ballad that was on one of our earlier albums, which really surprised me. So we do get that a lot, and I think it has to do with hopefully it has to do with the quality of the songwriting that we've been able to create over the years.
Episode 52, ESPN reporter Jeremy Schaap. It was horrifying to a lot of the old-timers, the Lou Theszes of the world, the Vern Gagnes will tell you, the world went to hell in a handbasket when he did that. But, what's really interesting, you're talking about things kind of in an indirect way, how he influenced the world of sports and covered. There's a direct way also. I mean, you can win a bar bet in any bar in America by asking somebody, who's the guy who invented the overhead cam that you see during the football games? I mean, that was right. Vince McMahon with the XFL, and that's become so ingrained into the way that we watch football on TV right now. That's a direct thing, Jeremy.
That's a direct thing. I mean, he was as responsible as anyone for the advent of pay-per-view, for the creation. Before pay-per-view, he's one of the guys who really created closed circuit. Was one of the pioneers, I should say, not creative, but one of the big guys in closed circuit events. The first WrestleManias were closed circuit. They weren't pay-per-view. They went pay-per-view after a couple of years, and that, was just an explosion. And, certainly this is not a value judgment about the product that he has created, because, you can have a lot of qualms with some of the stuff that's out there, but there is no doubt that he keeps millions and millions of people around the globe, not just in the United States, entertained and absorbed in his product. And it hasn't always been easy. I mean, he had to fend off Turner and WCW in the 90s. I mean, there was a time when they were losing every week in the ratings battle on Monday night to WCW. He fought them. He defeated them. He consolidated his empire. It's a remarkable success story from a business standpoint. And when you talk about people who've had an impact on their industry, I mean, he's not just the guy who's in charge of basically the industry the way that, say Roger Goodell's in charge of the NFL. He's not just the guy who owns the product the way that all the owners in the NFL own their teams. He's also one of the biggest performers in the business. I mean, he is one of the biggest stars that they've ever had in the history of pro wrestling as a character in the ring. And he's also the creative force behind the storylines. It's amazing the extent to which this one man has exercised control over this entire enormous segment of the entertainment industry.
Episode 81, Ziggy cartoonist Tom Wilson. You probably get a lot of good feedback from people about the book, and as well as the Ziggy character itself, too, because it really has become iconic over time. One of the things in this book, too, where you were really able to break down the process of how the character evolved, even down to what it was like to draw the character, and some of the nuances. We joked the last time on about the Dead Man's Curve, a decidedly Clevelandish name for talking about the part of the nose, just to get to see behind the curtain. I find that in interviewing people on this show, people are always fascinated for a look behind the curtain of however processes go. Ziggy being what it is, something that we all see on a daily basis in the newspaper, I think that's been something. The inspirational part of the book people appreciate, but just the way you humanize the process also, how Ziggy came to be initially and how you've helped carry it along.
Well, thanks. That is a big part of the book, and again, I have to credit the character. It's kind of like as we spoke with this campaign, with Ziggy's Live Strong Challenge. You watch something enter the world kind of in a very unexpected way, and it comes on the scene and takes a life of its own and evolves and reaches out to people. It's the same kind of process. Ziggy became iconic and became the character that he is, and that so many people empathize with because of the strength of his character. There's no doubt in my mind about it. He represents something very special in all of us and personifies that. Again, it's the same kind of thing with Live Strong. it came on the scene. It's a result of its own character. It's a strength of character that inspires and lives on and brings other people to it. To watch character unfold in one way or the other, literally or figuratively, is a very inspiring process. And Ziggy's experience has been that, it's been inspiring for me. I'm honored to be his creator and an artist. But there's not a day that goes by that I realize that the real strength is in the character himself.
Episode 108, Revision 3 Internet TV CEO Jim Louderback. I got to think one of your jobs there, you and the folks who are helping you run this thing as you're going through, that's probably got to be a very important part of the screening process. You're looking at these people and, they may be very entertaining, but if they don't have that authenticity, I got to believe that they probably don't have that kind of importance to you.
Exactly. They've got to be real. They've got to know the topic. They've got to be experts. And, and everybody on our network is like that, which is great. They all love it, and they all love what they're talking about. And look, you see the same things happening in other media. I mean, look at Monday Night Football, right? Look at some of the idiots that they put into the, and I will name no names, into the booth there. Now look at Gruden. I mean, John Gruden knows, that guy's legendary. Finally they found somebody to replace Madden who's got the same level of expertise and intelligence and understanding and authenticity about the game. And so it doesn't matter what media it is, we're moving more to that world and away from the idea that you can just, be talented at being a happy-looking pretty girl or guy and get a following.
Episode 1, Celebrity Deaths in Threes. Celebrity deaths here, the whole cliche about celebrity deaths coming in threes, we're calling this segment Takes Two to Tango but Three to Die. We are comparing what we saw in December with the all-time list here, or all-time in terms of recent years, because let's face it, society has a very short attention span. We're not going to go any further back than 99 on this list, but here's the 6 I have in this order. We'll get your thoughts afterwards here. June of 2001, this is number 6 on the list here. And why is it 6 instead of 5? Because I thought there was another good one on there. We like to go random here. I'll throw out as many good ones as I can find. And there were 6 of them. There just happened to be. June of 2001, Carol O'Connor, John Lee Hooker, and Jack Lemmon. And 2 guys that were actors, so not as much diversity there. But you throw John Lee Hooker. Anytime there's an ancient blues man in the mix, that makes it a little bit more diverse, perhaps, here. March of 1999, Dusty Springfield, Stanley Kubrick, Joe DiMaggio. That's kind of all over the place.
I like that one.
You got to give some props to that one. That's got some diversity on that one there. This one here I find funny mostly just because of the one guy. February 2000, Tom Landry, Jim Varney, and Charles Schultz.
What's that, Vern?
Exactly. The thought of that guy at the pearly gates with Charles Schultz of Peanuts fame and Tom Landry doing his Vern routine just sticks in my head here. Here's one that Paul Belfi is going to like also. I can tell you this, being the Dallas mark that he is. August of 2005, good old Miss Ellie, or Miss Ellie most of the time on Dallas, Barbara Bel Geddes, Peter Jennings, and King Fahd of Saudi Arabia. That's kind of all over the place a little bit. You got some foreign royalty in the mix. I respect that. There's a foreign head of state or former head of state in this next one here. We have 2 former heads of state, one of which is American. Not the first guy, James Brown. James Brown, Gerald Ford, and Saddam Hussein. That's all over the place as well here. Some would say, and I've heard the argument tonight, that might be the best of them, but I still say my favorite one, this is going to be hard to top if ever, May of 2002, former Notre Dame head coach Dan Devine, former Mafia boss Joseph Bonanno, and Seattle Slew. Just the fact that you have an animal in the mix. An animal, a mobster, and a Notre Dame football coach.
I think the fact that there's a celebrity animal to begin with
makes
it better.
How many of them are there? I mean, there's Seattle Slew, there's, as you said, Lassie, there's Barbaro. There's a very limited number of legitimate celebrity ones here.
Like Secretariat being in the top 100 athletes of the century.
Exactly. Episode 118, gambling addiction awareness activist and former quarterback Art Schleister. One of the anecdotes that you raise from when you were in college, it's kind of funny because you talked about bridging the era between Woody Hayes and kind of the modern era at Ohio State. The last game of Woody Hayes, that infamous Gator Bowl there, it's kind of funny because when you think back on it, of course, people remember Woody Hayes, people remember Charlie Bauman, people remember that. You know, I read that in the book like, oh yeah, that's right, Art Schleister was the quarterback for that. It's kind of funny because it's not always commonly remembered who threw the pass, and yet you said in the book that caused you some pain being a part of that very difficult moment for Woody.
Well, every time somebody brings that up, and when I'm speaking or traveling around and talking, I always say it sends me back into rehab for another year just to try to figure out what happened. But it was a tough time. You know, Coach Hayes was a living legend and great football coach, and you know, just unfortunate that one night I throw an interception, and you know, he strikes another of the opposing players and loses his job. And it, you know, it was a tough night for me. It was something I'll never forget. Sad to say the least. And you know, I had planned on playing for Coach Hayes for 4 years before he retired, and he ended up leaving after one. And so it was a big adjustment for me, but certainly a tough night, one that I think about often.
Episode 118, MLB Network analyst and former All-Star Sean Casey.
Sean, what's wrong with Matt Wieters, and is he going to come back next year?
That's a great question. I was just talking to Tom Verducci about that, who wrote that big article on him in Sports Illustrated. We were on the set together the other day at MLB Network, and I said, hey, bro, is this Matt Wieters going to end up being like the next Joe Mauer, like we've proclaimed him to be? And I think he's going to be a good big league ball player. I think his swing's a little long. I really do, and I think he's going to be, he's going to play 10 years in the big leagues, but I don't think he's going to be anything close to what we thought what everyone thought he was going to be.
That's not what Tim wanted to hear, but that's you know what?
He's your keeper league Tim.
Yeah.
Well, let me put it this way: I had Santana, Posey, and Wieters, and I traded both Santana and Posey this year and kept Wieters.
Bad move, brother. That's bad.
However,
listen, we don't need you running the Indians, all right?
Episode 106, investigative journalist Diane Diamond. What I'm wondering about, because again, you know, so much of it's done on location, as you alluded to. I always see in the credits at the end that the city of Albuquerque, you know, they participate, they cooperate, they get a promotional mention there. And in a sense, it's very flattering things being shown about the area visually. In another sense, it's a real underbelly kind of a situation. I'm always just kind of intrigued that a city is that enamored of associating with a show which talks about their violent meth trade.
Oh yeah, but listen, you got to realize when I grew up in Albuquerque in the decade, we were number one in crime per capita in America.
Really?
We were number one in bank robberies and murders and per capita. And so now, you know, we're so far down the list, it's great. You know, Governor Richardson, who I know for a lot of years, he's a piece of work, that guy. But the one really prescient thing he did was he said, you know what? Hollywood's getting too expensive to make movies. New York is getting too expensive. I'm going to lure them all here. And they gave great tax breaks. He set up the New Mexico Film Commission, and then they extended it to episodic television. It's been a real boon to Albuquerque because when I go back, I still have cousins and best friends from school there. You go downtown now, it's all revitalized, and the avenues are, well, they're not even really avenues, but the main streets are lined with those trailers from movie production houses. Mm-hmm. You know, there's the makeup trailer and the chow trailer and the, you know, whatever. And there's a real revitalization of downtown Albuquerque and Santa Fe and Taos, all the way up to Farmington in the north, because he did that. It's a really smart thing, I think.
Yeah. Episode 126, Sirius XM talk show host and executive Chris Mad Dog Russo. Congratulations. I know that the team that you are a foremost fan of in life, the San Francisco Giants, winning the World Series. As a lifelong fan of all the Cleveland sports franchises, I can only guess how the feeling goes, but why don't you describe it?
Well, it was tremendous, and, you know, the fact that it was a surprise makes it a lot better. I mean, there was not a lot of expectations on the team. You know, they were 6.5 out in late August, and obviously, you know, in trouble with Padres, and certainly in trouble when they went up against the Braves down in the game, you know, in trouble in Game 3, and
big underdogs against the Phillies. A lot of people thought they lost, that they would lose in Texas. So the idea that it was a tremendous surprise makes it all the more worthwhile, throwing the fact that they had about 3 or 4 really dramatic wins. They won with dominating pitching, didn't spend an incredible amount of money on free agency. As good as it gets if you're a Giant fan.
Episode 85, former Congressman Joe Diaguardi. Ron Paul in Congress, who I know that you're sympathetic with on a...
Oh, yeah, one of my friends, yes.
Yes,
a libertarian. Go ahead.
Exactly. 300 co-sponsors on his bill to audit the Fed. I'd like you to assuage the fears, if you can, of folks like myself, because I'm right with you on this stuff. I believe that it needs to be done. Having said that, fearing that the emperor has no clothes, I'm afraid you do that audit. We see what a house of cards this entire system is, and everything collapses like we were afraid of last year. Can you set straight people like me that are terrified that an audit of the Fed could bring everything down by revealing that the emperor's got no clothes?
Well, but you know what? We need to know what's going on. Why should we fear information? Why should we fear the truth? Why should we fear needing to know what's going on so we can plan for the future? We can't put our heads in the sand. In fact, I would go a step further than Ron Paul. I would ask for outside auditors. He didn't do that in his bill. He's asking for an audit by maybe the Government Accounting Office or the U.S. Treasury Department. Who knows? We have all kinds of auditors in the federal government. No, I would go 2 steps further than Ron Paul, and I did this in a rally to support him in front of City Hall, Manhattan, a couple of months ago, where they had the Audit the Fed rally. And I said, not only should we audit the Fed, we should have outside auditors audit the Fed. And number 2, not only should we audit the Fed, we should audit everything in government. We don't have outside audits, so we really can't trust the numbers. And that's a big problem right now. If we're going to protect shareholders by having SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission type accounting, which is based on generally accepted accounting principles, putting both assets and liabilities on the books, intergenerational fairness, so you don't pass bills to the next generation without them knowing it. Why are we doing that to protect the shareholders of publicly traded companies and not the taxpayers of America? Do you have to be an accountant to understand that makes common sense?
Episode 78, sports activist and lawyer Steve Callis. And I understand we got some breaking news here tonight that you will be one of the first people on the air anywhere to talk about the resolution of this, but you called to our attention this tragic case. A boy who was killed by a ball hit by an aluminum bat. Louisville Slugger was being sued over this in regards to the bat being regarded as an unsafe implement here, and I understand the jury's returned with the verdict.
Yeah, I think you'll be the first guy in the country to get this. I got a phone call from the plaintiff's lawyer literally 15 minutes ago that said the jury in Helena, Montana, in the case of Brandon Patch was an 18-year-old pitcher pitching in an American Legion game. Ball hit off an aluminum bat, came back, hit him in the head. He collapsed on the mound. They rushed him to the hospital. 4 hours later, he died. This is in 2003 now. The family eventually brought a lawsuit that went to trial last week, finished yesterday. The jury deliberated yesterday and all day today and just came in. Now, I'm in the East at 7 o'clock. I assume that's like 5 in Montana. Mm-hmm. But the jury came back with a verdict for the Patch family, for the plaintiffs, for $856,000 because Louisville Slugger failed to warn these kids on their bat that these bats could be very dangerous and could result in injury. I just got off the phone prior to coming on with you, Rick, with Joe White, who is the plaintiff's lawyer, who I would say to you is probably the leading lawyer in America on this topic. He's the only other guy I know who got a jury verdict against Louisville Slugger back in Oklahoma a few years ago. And he said, on the one hand, he's happy. You know, it's not about money, and that's what the Patch family said. They actually tried to get a law passed in Montana banning aluminum bats. Had they gotten that law passed, they said they would have never filed the lawsuit. They didn't get the law passed. They filed the lawsuit. They won a judgment today of $850,000. You got to think Louisville Slugger is going to appeal, right? Because it's Louisville Slugger. But this should send a message across the country. I have a lot of articles up on my website about this stuff over the years because this is a big issue. If you've got a kid from 5 years old through college, you know that aluminum bats, if they play baseball, aluminum bats hit the ball much harder than wood and are potentially more dangerous. So it is a victory for the people who don't want aluminum bats. I happen to be one of those people, Rick. I know in New York City where I live, they were banned a couple of years ago.
Episode 84, End of the Decade Music Roundtable. And I go back again. It's scalded into my brain. Growing up in the 80s, the aforementioned Howard Jones and Wham, and you couldn't escape it. Versus this decade, what's some of the biggest stuff out there? Taylor Swift, the Jonas Brothers, whatever. I couldn't hardly
Carrie Underwood.
I couldn't name you hardly anything from any of them. We have finally gotten to the point where we can wall ourselves off. But what you mentioned, though, that's one instance of where the Black Eyed Peas can break through. Lady Gaga, you can't escape it. It's like a throwback to when I was growing up.
Why would you want to escape something like that?
It's a guilt. Well, you know what? I take that. I've said before, I have no guilty pleasures. I proudly like ABBA. I proudly like everything that I like. I have no sense of shame. I like a lot of Lady Gaga stuff. If I had shame, I'd be ashamed of that.
If you saw the Elle magazine cover for this month, you would never dislike Lady Gaga again.
Does she address the hermaphrodite rumors in there?
I didn't look at it, so read it, Rick.
Okay, all right. Well, let me ask you this then. Is there anything you could tell from the cover that answers the question one way or another?
I'm thinking she's not.
Okay, all right. An educated guess, I'm sure. But anyways, they're like the exception to the rule. Black Eyed Peas, Lady Gaga, I'm sure we could think of one or two other things like that to where you can't escape it, or if you wanted to or whatever. But I can tune out Taylor Swift. I can live my life and never hear any of her crap. Jonas Brothers. That's one of the things that changed in this decade, too. Things are getting, I don't want to say segregated because that word always gets taken in a racial context, but balkanized, however you want to call it. You can wall yourself off basically just in stuff that you like, and I don't think that was the case 10 years ago. Episode 99, Sportscaster Kenny Albert. The first thing I got to ask you about, it's always funny when we've had this booking in the works for a while, but something kind of always happens, and immediately off the bat there becomes a timely thing to ask you about. You happen to be in the booth, of course, on Saturday for the marathon game with the Mets and the Cardinals, and it's funny, I saw the thing in the New York Daily News today here where because you apparently made a point of noting that you stayed in the booth the whole time here, and the Daily News made a crack about how you probably cost yourself a lucrative Lomax contract by doing that.
That is true. I was in the booth for the entire 20 innings, the 6-hour, 53-minute game, never made a run for the men's room, never really felt the need to, didn't really drink that much during the game. It's a little different during a baseball game, especially on television, as opposed to a hockey game on radio or a basketball game on radio where you're really straining your voice for 3 hours. Although this was close to 7 hours, really never felt the need to drink much, which led to the fact that I never had to leave the booth once. Tim McCarver, my partner, I think left once during the 7th inning stretch, but he hung in there for the last 13 innings as well.
7th inning stretch, as though he knew what lay ahead of him almost.
Exactly.
On the FDH Lounge, our dignitaries always speak their minds, and so do our guests. Just listen to pro wrestling legend Jim Cornette, Liz Clayman, and Bob Barker. Next time you're passing through town, the FDH Lounge, sir, is treating you to that so you can write a restaurant review of Goodman's.
If I come to Cleveland, I get corned beef. I'll be there with bells on.
I had, as I said, a wonderful time at CNBC, but I knew it was time for me to leave because, I'd landed Buffett, I'd landed Bill Gates. I felt like I'd done everything I could do, and every time I'd pitch a small business story, they'd say, you can't trade it. You can't trade on it. It's not publicly traded. And I kind of thought that was a little myopic, and I was thinking, maybe I'll go to Animal Planet or something, I thought, hey, heck, I'll go to Al Jazeera. I'll be the first Jew on Al Jazeera. That's what I was ready for.
Well, I tell you, you're a very discerning fellow.
The FDH Lounge, the great American radio show on Internet TV, where nothing is off topic.